Welcome to another episode of LZBC Podcast with our host Myrtle Fisher and Alan Ross. Today we will explore how to be a better Christian, enjoy and be blessed.
You guys shared that you want to explore becoming a better Christian, and I think we've got some fascinating stuff to dig into here. No matter where you're at on your faith journey, this one's for you.
Absolutely.
We're taking a deep dive into this guide that not only lays out practical steps, but it backs them up with the King James Version.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah, giving it that classic feel.
There's just something about the King James that really resonates.
It really does.
People.
And get this, we're going to be talking about stewardship,
Okay.
but not just in the typical financial sense.
Right.
This guy goes way beyond that.
Interesting.
Plus, there's this verse about iron sharpening iron that has me thinking in a whole new way.
Ooh, I like that one.
So where do we even begin with all of this?
Well, I think the guide starts in a really smart place by beginning with that foundation.
Okay.
Of building that deep personal connection with God.
Okay.
And it emphasizes prayer, Bible study, and worship as those core pillars
Got it.
of the Christian life.
So it's all about getting that foundation
Yes,
solid first.
exactly.
I like that. And speaking of foundations, they start off strong with Philippians 4.6,
Yes,
which I have to admit is a personal favorite.
that's a good one.
Be careful for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God.
Yeah.
I especially love
Yeah.
the emphasis on with thanksgiving.
It's more than just tacking on a thank you at the end,
Yeah.
right? It really speaks to a spirit of gratitude that kind of permeates our entire prayer life.
Mm.
You know, it's about recognizing God's blessings even in the midst of challenges and approaching prayer with a heart full of thanksgiving.
It makes you wonder, does that change how our prayers are received?
Oh, that's a good question.
If we come from a place of gratitude rather than just focusing on what we lack.
Yeah, and it ties into, what we're learning today about the power of gratitude.
Right.
Modern psychology is actually backing up what the Bible has been saying for centuries.
Mm.
A grateful heart can truly transform our outlook and our experience of life.
So even ancient wisdom is finding new relevance
It is.
in modern research.
Absolutely.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so prayer is vital, but what about actually understanding God's word?
That's where Bible study comes in.
Okay.
And the guide uses Psalm 119.1-5 to illustrate this beautifully.
Okay.
Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path.
Wow.
It just paints this picture of
Yeah.
the Bible as this source of guidance and illumination.
I can see why they chose the King James for this guide.
Right.
That kind of poetic language really resonates.
It does. The King James, with its history and its majestic language, it holds a special place in the hearts of many Christians.
Yeah.
It's often seen as the definitive translation,
Yeah.
steeped in tradition.
So we've established that personal connection with God,
Yeah.
but how does that translate into actually living as a Christian?
That's where the guide dives into what it means to live biblically,
Okay.
focusing on obedience, integrity, and compassion as key elements. Oh,
And they don't shy away from strong words. They use John 14.15. If you love me, keep my commandments. It's simple, but it's profound.
It is powerful.
And it cuts to the core of what it means to follow Christ.
That's a powerful message, but I have to admit that the idea of obedience can be a bit tricky sometimes,
Yeah.
especially in today's world where things aren't always so black and white.
Yeah, you're right. It's not about blind obedience.
Right.
It's about aligning our hearts and minds with God's will,
Okay.
discerning His path for our lives, and striving to live in a way that reflects His love and values.
So it's about a deeper understanding of why we choose to obey.
Exactly.
That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
And speaking of aligning our actions with our beliefs, the guide then pulls out Proverbs 12.22,
Okay.
which states, lying lips are abomination to the Lord, but that deal truly are His delight.
It's pretty strong language.
It is. Yeah, but it really drives home the importance of honesty and integrity
Yeah,
in the Christian life. Sometimes those stark pronouncements really make you stop and think.
for sure.
It's not just a suggestion, it's a fundamental principle.
Right.
But I think a lot of people struggle with putting these ideals into practice.
Absolutely. And that's where compassion comes in.
Okay.
The guide uses Ephesians 4.32 to highlight this. And be ye kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven you.
Forgiveness, that's something I personally struggle with.
Yeah.
It can be so hard to let go of hurt and resentment, even when we know we should.
Forgiveness is a journey, not a destination.
Okay.
It's often messy and complex, and it doesn't always happen overnight. But this verse reminds us that we're called to extend the same grace and forgiveness that God offers us,
Wow.
recognizing our shared humanity and our need for compassion.
So we're called to model that same forgiveness in our own lives.
We are.
That's a challenging but powerful concept.
It is, and it's a beautiful example of how these seemingly separate virtues, obedience, integrity, compassion, are actually interwoven.
Yeah.
Each supporting and strengthening the others.
It's like a tapestry,
Yes,
each thread contributing to the overall picture.
I love that.
So we've connected with God. We're striving to live by His word. But where does action come into play?
That's where the guide shifts gears and focuses on serving others,
Okay.
emphasizing both acts of service and loving your neighbor.
Okay. I'm curious to see how they approach this. What verses do they use?
For acts of service, they highlight Galatians 5:13, which says, "For, brethren, ye have been called unto liberty. Only use not liberty for an occasion to the flesh, but by love serve one another."
That use not liberty for the flesh part really jumps out at me. It's a reminder that even our freedom has boundaries,
It does.
especially when it comes to how we treat others.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that true freedom comes from serving others, not indulging our own selfish desires.
Okay.
It's about using our liberty responsibly and lovingly.
So it's about channeling that freedom towards something bigger than ourselves.
Yes.
I like that. And what about the idea of loving your neighbor? That's a pretty big concept.
It is a big concept.
Yeah.
And the guide goes straight to the heart of it with Mark 12:31. And the second is namely this: "Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There is none other commandment greater than these."
The golden rule. I've always found it fascinating how this concept transcends cultures and religions.
Yes.
It speaks to a universal truth about human connection and empathy.
It really does. It boils down the essence of Christian love, treating others with the same kindness, respect, and compassion that we desire for ourselves.
Yeah.
It's a simple but profound principle that can transform our relationships and communities.
It makes you wonder if everyone truly lived by this principle, how different the world might be.
It's a powerful thought.
It is. And it brings us to the next stage of this journey, which is all about sharing our faith.
Yes,
This is where it gets a little intimidating for me, to be honest.
I understand.
I think a lot of people struggle with the idea of evangelizing
Right.
or witnessing.
Yeah, you're not alone. But the guide approaches it in a way that feels more approachable,
Yeah.
focusing on witnessing and discipleship as two sides of the same coin.
Uh-huh.
For witnessing, they draw on Matthew 28:19-20. "Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you."
I think what makes this less daunting is that it's not just about converting people.
Right.
It's about teaching, guiding, and supporting them on their own faith journey.
Absolutely. It's about sharing the good news and walking alongside others as they explore what it means to follow Christ.
I like that.
And for discipleship, they highlight 2 Timothy 2:2. "And the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men, who shall be able to teach others also."
This reminds me of that whole each one teach one concept.
Yes,
It's about the power of mentorship and passing on knowledge from one generation to the next.
exactly. And it's not just about passing on information. It's about fostering spiritual growth and equipping others to become disciples themselves.
I never thought about it this way, but in a sense, that's what we're doing right now, isn't it?
It is.
Taking all this knowledge and trying to share it in a way that's engaging and helpful.
It's a beautiful parallel. We're all disciples in some way, learning and growing from one another.
I love that.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so we've connected with God. We're
Well-
trying to live out His teachings. We're serving others. And now we're sharing our faith. What's next on this journey towards being a better Christian?
The guide delves into the crucial aspect of spiritual growth.
Spiritual growth. What exactly does that entail?
It's about deepening our understanding of our faith and nurturing our relationship with God through practices like fasting,
Yeah.
continuous learning, and being part of a supportive community.
Okay.
And they use some really interesting verses to illustrate each of these points.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more. What verse do they use for fasting?
They highlight a passage from Matthew 6:17-18. "But thou, when thou fastest, anoint thine head and wash thy face, that thou appear not unto men to fast, but unto thy Father which is in secret. And thy Father, which seeth in secret, shall reward thee openly." What strikes me about this passage is the emphasis on the inward transformation that fasting can bring, rather than focusing on the outward act of abstaining from food.
You know, fasting has always felt a bit mysterious to me.
Yeah.
What's the real purpose beyond just giving up food?
It's about denying yourself physically to create space for spiritual growth. It's a way to discipline the body and focus the mind on God. It's been practiced for centuries across different faiths, and it's a powerful tool for cultivating humility, self-control, and a deeper connection with the divine.
Wow, I never thought about it that way. It's not just about deprivation.
Right.
It's about creating space for something more meaningful. So what about continuous learning? How does that play into spiritual growth?
For this, they use 2 Timothy 3.16:17, which says, "All scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be perfect, thoroughly furnished unto all good works."
So the Bible is our primary source of knowledge and guidance.
It's certainly a foundational text, but it's not the only source of learning.
Okay.
It encourages us to be lifelong learners,
Okay.
seeking truth and wisdom from a variety of sources.
Got it.
Theological books, sermons, podcasts like this one,
Right.
engaging in meaningful conversations with others, and even reflecting on our own experiences.
So it's about being open to learning and growing wherever those opportunities arise.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's the importance of community.
Okay.
The guide uses Hebrews 10.25 to emphasize this. Not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another. And so much the more as you see the day approaching.
In a world that often feels increasingly isolated, that sense of community and belonging is more important than ever.
It is. We're not meant to walk this journey alone.
Yeah.
We need each other for support, encouragement, and accountability.
Right.
Being part of a community allows us to share our burdens, celebrate our joys, and learn from one another's experiences.
So it's like a network of support that helps us stay strong and connected.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's through that connection and support that we can continue to grow and mature in our faith.
So we've covered deepening our connection with God, living by his teachings, serving others, sharing our faith, and nurturing our own spiritual growth.
That's a lot.
What's the next step in this journey towards becoming a better Christian?
The guide then takes us to a place of humility and surrender.
Ooh, those are big ones.
Yeah.
Humility and surrender, those can be tough concepts to grasp, let alone actually live out.
They are. But the guide offers some powerful verses that can help us navigate these challenging but essential aspects
Okay.
of the Christian walk.
My ears.
Hmm.
What's the first verse they delve into?
They start with James 4.7. "Submit yourselves therefore to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you."
That imagery of resisting the devil and him fleeing, that's powerful stuff.
It is.
But what exactly does the devil represent? Is it a literal being or something more symbolic?
That's a great question, and it's one that has been debated for centuries.
Right.
Some interpret the devil as a literal being,
Okay.
while others see it as a representation of evil or temptation that we all face.
So it's open to interpretation.
To some extent, yes. The
Right.
Bible uses metaphors and symbolism, and different people connect with those in different ways.
Right.
But regardless of how we interpret it, the core message is clear. We have the power to resist temptation
Yeah.
and choose to align ourselves with God.
So it's about making conscious choices that lead us closer to God rather than succumbing to those things that pull us away.
Yes.
That makes sense. What about humility? What verse do they use to illustrate that concept?
The guide uses Micah 6.8, which beautifully encapsulates the essence of humility. "He hath showed thee, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee, but to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God."
There's a quiet strength in those words. Walk humbly with thy God. It's a stark contrast to the way the world often defines success, power, wealth, status.
It is true. Humility is about recognizing that our accomplishments are not our own, but ultimately come from God. It's about putting our ego aside and recognizing our place in the grand scheme of things.
It's almost like a relief, isn't it?
It can be.
Like we don't have to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders.
Right.
We can surrender to a power greater than ourselves.
Exactly. And that brings us to the concept of dependence on God.
Okay.
The guide uses Proverbs 3.5 to 6 to highlight this. "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths."
I love the poetic language in that verse. Lean not unto thine own understanding. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes we just have to let go of control and trust in God's plan,
Yes.
even when it doesn't make sense to us.
It's about surrendering our will to his will, recognizing that he has a bigger picture in mind, even if we can't see it in the moment.
It's about faith, isn't it?
It is.
Trusting that even when things are difficult, God is working things out for our good.
Exactly. And that faith is what sustains us through the challenges and uncertainties of life.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Deepening our connection with God, living biblically, serving others, sharing our faith, and nurturing our spiritual growth, and embracing humility and surrender.
We have.
It's been quite a journey so far. What's next on this path towards being a better Christian?
Well, the guide then dives into a concept that's often misunderstood. Stewardship.
Stewardship, isn't that just about money? Like tithing and managing our finances?
It's often associated with finances, yes.
Right.
But the guide takes a much broader view. It talks about being responsible stewards of all that God has entrusted to us, our time, our talents, our resources, and even the environment.
That's a much more expansive view of stewardship than I'm used to.
Okay.
I'm curious to see how they break this down. What's the first verse they use?
They start with Colossians 3:23. And whatsoever you do, do it heartily, as to the Lord, and not unto men.
So even the most mundane tasks can become acts of service.
They can.
Like doing the dishes or folding laundry can have spiritual significance.
Exactly. It's about shifting our perspective and recognizing that everything we do can be an offering to God.
Wow.
It's about finding meaning and purpose in the everyday moments, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant.
That's a beautiful way to look at it. It's about bringing intentionality and purpose
Yes.
to every aspect of our lives.
It is. And it ties into the concept of generosity. The guide uses 2 Corinthians 9:7 to highlight this aspect of stewardship. Every man according as he purposeth in his heart, so let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity. For God loveth a cheerful giver.
So it's about giving freely from a place of love, not out of obligation or guilt.
Exactly. And that giving can take many forms: our time, our talents, our financial resources, or simply a kind word or a listening ear.
It's about sharing what we have, however big or small, with a grateful and generous heart.
Precisely. And then there's a verse that I found really interesting in this context.
Okay.
It's Genesis 2:15. And the Lord God took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. I was surprised to see this included in a guide about being a better Christian.
Me too. What does tending a garden have to do with anything?
It's about environmental stewardship.
Okay.
Caring for God's creation is increasingly seen as a core part of Christian responsibility. We're called to be good stewards of the earth, not just for ourselves, but for future generations.
That makes a lot of sense.
Aren't you?
It's about recognizing that our actions have an impact on the world around us and taking responsibility for our role in caring for God's creation.
It is, and it's a beautiful way to connect our faith with our actions in the real world.
So we've covered connecting with God, living by His Word, serving others, sharing our faith, nurturing our spiritual growth, embracing humility and surrender, and now being responsible stewards of all that we've been given. What's the final piece of the puzzle when it comes to being a better Christian?
Well, the guide wraps up with what might seem like the most obvious, but is often the most challenging: building strong relationships.
Relationships are at the core of the human experience, aren't they? But I imagine it takes more than just good intentions to build strong, healthy relationships, especially within the context of faith.
You're absolutely right. And the guide emphasizes this by focusing on 3 key areas: Christian fellowship, mentorship, and nurturing our relationships with family and friends.
That covers a lot of ground. What verse do they use to talk about Christian fellowship?
They highlight 1 Thessalonians 5:11. Wherefore comfort yourselves together and edify one another, even as also ye do.
Comfort yourselves together. That phrase just evokes such a sense of warmth and support.
It does.
It reminds me of the importance of having a community where we can share our burdens, our joys and our struggles without judgment.
Exactly. Christian fellowship provides that safe space where we can be vulnerable, authentic, and supported. It's about being there for one another, offering encouragement, and walking alongside each other on this journey of faith.
It's like having a built-in support system for those times when life gets tough.
It is.
As it inevitably does.
Right. And for mentorship, they revisit Proverbs 27:21c, even the one about iron sharpeneth iron. So a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend. But this time, they focus on the mentorship aspect, emphasizing the reciprocal nature of this relationship.
It's like what we were talking about earlier, how we can all be both disciples and mentors at different points in our lives. We all have something to teach and something to learn.
Exactly. Mentorship is about walking alongside someone, sharing our experiences, offering guidance, and learning from each other. It's a powerful way to grow in our faith and support each other on the journey.
So it's not just about receiving guidance, it's about giving back and helping others grow as well.
Precisely. And finally, to bring it all together, they use Ephesians 4:2-3 to emphasize the importance of love and unity in all our relationships, whether they be within the church, our families, or our broader communities. It says, with all lowliness and meekness, with long suffering, forbearing one another in love, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. It's a reminder that even in a world that often feels divided and chaotic,
Yes,
we can choose to build bridges of love, understanding, and compassion.
absolutely.
It's about striving for unity, not just within our own circles, but in our interactions with everyone we encounter.
It's a beautiful challenge, isn't it, to be ambassadors of peace and reconciliation in a world that desperately needs it.
It is. Well, we really covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. I feel like we've just scratched the surface of all this wisdom contained in these verses.
It is amazing, isn't it, how these ancient texts can still speak so powerfully to our lives today.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I'm realizing that this journey towards being a better Christian is not about achieving perfection. It's about striving, seeking, and growing day by day.
Yes.
It's about continually deepening our connection with God, living out his teachings, and building a life that reflects his love.
It is, and it's a journey we don't have to take alone.
So true. And speaking of guidance,
Yeah.
as we move into the next part of this deep dive, I'm curious to hear your insights on how we can continue to grow and evolve on this journey. What are some practical steps we can take to truly integrate these principles into our daily lives?
That's a great question, and one that I think we can all benefit from exploring. We should definitely delve into that more. As we've been unpacking these verses and reflecting on these principles, it's striking how interconnected they all are.
That's so true.
Yeah,
It's like a beautiful tapestry,
it is.
each thread woven together to create this complete picture.
Absolutely.
You can't really serve others authentically if you're not cultivating that personal connection with God or striving to live with integrity. It's all part of a holistic
It is.
approach to faith.
Exactly. And it underscores the idea that being a better Christian isn't about checking boxes or following a rigid set of rules.
Right.
It's about an inward transformation that radiates outward into every area of our lives.
It's about becoming more Christ-like in
Yeah.
all that we do.
Yes,
And that's a journey, not a destination, right?
absolutely. It's a lifelong pursuit of growth, transformation, and becoming more aligned with God's will.
It occurs to me that this guide isn't just for people who already consider themselves devout Christians.
I agree.
It's for anyone who's searching for a more meaningful and purposeful life,
Right.
even if they're not quite sure about the whole God thing yet.
That's a great point. These principles, these verses, they speak to something universal within us.
Yeah.
The desire to connect with something greater than ourselves, to love and serve others, to make a positive impact on the world.
It's about finding that deeper meaning and purpose, even in the midst of our everyday routines and challenges.
Yes, it's about discovering that spark of the divine in the ordinary, in the mundane, in those little moments that make up our lives.
It brings to mind that verse about stewardship, Colossians 3:23.
Yeah.
And whatsoever ye do, do it heartily, as to the Lord and not unto men. It's like a call to action, to bring that sense of dedication and intentionality to everything we do.
It's a powerful shift in perspective, isn't it? It's about recognizing that even the simplest acts, like washing the dishes or making dinner for our family, can be done with a sense of love and service as an offering to God.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's like elevating the ordinary to the extraordinary.
It is. And that elevation reminds me of those verses about community and fellowship.
Yeah.
We can support each other in living this way,
Right.
in seeing the sacred in the everyday.
How do we create that kind of supportive community where people feel safe to share their struggles, their doubts, and their triumphs without fear of judgment?
Well, 1 Thessalonians 5:11 encourages us to comfort yourselves together and edify one another, even as also you do. It's about fostering an environment of acceptance, encouragement, and genuine care.
It's about creating a space where people feel seen and heard and loved unconditionally.
Exactly, where they can be authentically themselves without pretense or the need to put on a facade.
And where they can be challenged and supported as they strive to live out these principles.
It's about creating a space where iron sharpeneth iron, as Proverbs 27:17 so aptly puts it. We need each other to refine us, to challenge us, to help us become the best versions of ourselves.
It's a reminder that spiritual growth is not a solitary endeavor.
Right.
We need each other.
We do. And that need for connection extends beyond just our fellow Christians.
Right.
It reaches out to our families, our friends, and our wider communities.
That reminds me of that last verse from Ephesians,
Yes.
the one about love,
Yeah.
unity, and peace.
Yes.
It feels especially poignant in today's world, which can feel so divided and fractured.
You're right. Ephesians 4:2-3 calls us to, with all lowliness and meekness, with long suffering, forbearing one another in love, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace.
It's a powerful reminder that even amidst disagreements and differences, we can choose to build bridges of understanding and compassion.
It's about seeking common ground, recognizing our shared humanity, and remembering that we are all children of God.
Even when it's hard.
Especially when it's
As we wrap up this part of our conversation, I'm struck by the enduring wisdom of the Bible.
It is amazing.
It's a book that has been read and studied for millennia, and yet it still speaks so powerfully to our lives today.
It's truly a testament to the timeless nature of its message. It speaks to the deepest longings of the human heart, to our yearning for meaning, purpose, connection, and love.
It provides guidance, comfort, and inspiration for every season of life.
It does. It's a wellspring of wisdom that we can draw from again and again.
I'm curious, is there a particular verse from this guide that's really resonating with you right now?
You know, I keep coming back to Micah 6.8, the one about walking humbly with God.
Yeah.
It just serves as this gentle but powerful reminder that true fulfillment isn't about worldly accolades, but about aligning our lives with God's purpose and living in a way that reflects His love. What about you? Is there a verse that's particularly sticking with you?
That's a tough one.
I know, right?
They're all so rich with meaning.
Mm.
But if I had to choose, I think I'd go with 1 Peter 2.1.
Okay.
Having your conversation honest among the Gentiles, that whereas they speak against you as evildoers, they may, by your good works, which they shall behold, glorify God in the day of visitation.
That's a powerful verse. It speaks to the importance of letting our actions speak louder than our words.
Exactly. It's about being a living testament to God's love and grace, even in the face of criticism or opposition.
It's a reminder that our actions have a ripple effect. They can inspire others, draw them closer to God, and ultimately make a positive impact on the world around us.
So powerful.
It is.
And it really ties into the core message of what it means to be a better Christian. It's not just about what we believe. It's about how we live out those beliefs in tangible ways.
It's about embodying the teachings of Christ in our thoughts, words, and actions.
Exactly. And that's a journey that extends far beyond this deep dive. It's a lifelong commitment to growth, transformation, and service.
And it's a journey we don't have to navigate alone. We have the support of our fellow Christians, the guidance of the Bible, and the ever-present love of God to guide us every step of the way.
So true. And speaking of guidance, as we move into the final part in this deep dive, I'm curious to hear your insights on how we can continue to grow and evolve on this journey. What are some practical steps we can take to truly integrate these principles into our daily lives?
That's a great question, and one that I think we can all benefit from exploring. Let's delve into that in our final segment.
It's easy to get overwhelmed by all this talk about being a better Christian. Like, where do you even begin? And how do you know if you're actually making progress?
That's so true. We can get so caught up in striving for perfection that we forget the grace and compassion at the heart of the Christian faith.
So it's not about achieving some unattainable ideal.
Right.
It's about the journey itself.
Exactly. It's about taking those small, consistent steps day by day, seeking to align our hearts and minds with God's will.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that we're all works in progress, perfectly imperfect in God's eyes.
That's reassuring.
Right.
It takes the pressure off a bit, doesn't it? It's about progress, not perfection.
Absolutely.
But how do we translate all these beautiful verses and principles into concrete actions?
Yeah.
How do we actually live this out in our everyday lives?
That's where the rubber meets the road, isn't it? I think it starts with being intentional.
Yeah.
We talked about the importance of prayer, Bible study, worship.
Right.
Those are foundational practices that help us cultivate that connection with God and nourish our spiritual growth.
So it's not just about passively listening to a sermon or reading a verse.
Right.
It's about actively engaging with our faith.
Exactly. It's about creating space in our busy lives to connect with God, to listen for His guidance, and to allow His word to transform our hearts and minds.
But sometimes it feels like there just aren't enough hours in the day. How do we make time for all of this?
It requires prioritizing, doesn't it? Just like we make time for the things that are important to us.
Yeah.
Our work, our families, our hobbies. We need to carve out time for our spiritual well-being. Even if it's just a few minutes each day, those small moments can make a big difference.
So it's about those little consistent actions that add up over time.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It could be as simple as starting your day with a short prayer of gratitude, reading a passage from the Bible, or listening to some uplifting music.
It's about incorporating those practices into our daily routines.
Right. And remember, we're not alone in this.
Yeah.
We have the support of our fellow Christians, the wisdom of the Bible, and the ever-present love of God to guide us.
Speaking of support, we talk about the importance of fellowship and community. How can we cultivate those deeper connections with others?
Well, it starts with being intentional about the relationships we nurture.
Right.
Make time for meaningful conversations.
Right.
Be a good listener. Offer encouragement and support. Reach out to those who might be struggling.
It's about being present and engaged with the people in our lives.
It is. And remember, it's not just about receiving support.
Yeah.
It's about giving it as well.
So it's a two-way street.
Yeah,
We both give and receive.
exactly. We build each other up, and those strong relationships can help us weather the storms of life and stay grounded in our faith.
I love that. It's like a spiritual safety net.
Yeah.
And what about putting our faith into action? We talked about serving others and making a difference in the world. How do we find those opportunities to live out our faith in practical ways?
There are countless ways to serve both within our churches and our wider communities. It could be volunteering at a local soup kitchen, mentoring a young person, or simply lending a helping hand to a neighbor in need.
It's about finding those needs and using our unique gifts and talents to meet them.
Exactly. And remember, even the smallest acts of kindness can make a ripple effect.
Right.
A smile, a kind word, a listening ear, those can have a profound impact on someone's life.
It's about being a light in the world, reflecting God's love in all that we do.
It is. And that brings us back to that verse from 1 Peter 2.1 about letting our good works glorify God.
Right.
It's not about boasting or seeking recognition. It's about living in a way that inspires others and draws them closer to God.
So it's about aligning our actions with our beliefs,
Yeah,
making sure that what we do reflects what we say we believe.
exactly. It's about authenticity, integrity, and letting our lives speak for themselves.
This has been such an enriching conversation. I feel like I have a deeper understanding of what it means to be a better Christian.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about striving for an unattainable ideal. It's about that continuous journey of growth, service, and love.
And remember, it's a journey we don't have to take alone. We have the support of our fellow Christians, the guidance of Scripture, and the ever-present love of God to guide us.
So well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. But before we go, we'd love to hear from you. What were your key takeaways from this episode? Was there a particular verse that resonated with you? A principle that challenged you? Share your thoughts with us on social media or on our website. We always appreciate hearing your perspectives.
Until next time, may you continue to seek to grow and to shine your light brightly in the world.
And may God bless you on your journey.
Thanks you for joining us for another LZBC podcast. Till next time, keep the faith.